Come on in, everyone, and welcome to Clinical Research Education by Dr. Kentress Davison. Today, we're going to talk about acronyms, common acronyms in the clinical research field. Of course, this is not all of them, but it's some to get you started learning the foundation of clinical research. So we have a list. We're going to start from the left side and work our way to the right. We have the clinical research coordinator. It is abbreviated CRC. This is the person that typically conducts the clinical research visit. It can be a nurse, certified medical assistant, a non-nurse. It's common, but believe it or not, there are some MDs and some nurse practitioners and physician assistants that become clinical research coordinators to break into clinical research. Then we have the clinical research associate, the CRA, also commonly known as the monitor. It's the person that comes to the sites to make sure that the site investigator is conducting the clinical trial per protocol and ensures patient safety and data integrity. We have the clinical research organization. It is the company that the sponsors typically hire to help run and oversee the site's conduction of a clinical trial. The clinical trial management system, or the CTMS, is the system used to chart locally. It's called the CTMS system. The case report files, the CRFs. This is the electronic copy of the site source. So it is designed typically by the sponsor. The CRA may have some input, depends on what they're being contracted to do. And the site's chart in this system, so the data can be reviewed centrally. Electronic Trial Master File, or the ETMF. It is the master file is essentially the abbreviation of the ISF that can be stored for the sponsor's benefit. So on the site, you have the ISF, the investigator site file, and those important documents from that investigator site file are uploaded into the electronic trial master file. So both the sponsor can have a copy and the site can have a copy. Electronic data capture, EDC. We have several common companies that are used by sponsors and CROs to collect the data. Though that is where the CRFs are housed in the EDC. Institutional Review Board, IRB. This is going to be very common term at the site level for individuals to be familiar with. Some sites even require that you take the IRB training. This is the ethics committee that oversees the conduction of a clinical trial from the regulatory standpoint. So you have some things that have to go through the IRB for approval before it is able to be implemented at the site level. Informed consent form, ISF. This is the document that study participants sign to show their willingness to participate in a clinical trial or their legal authorized representative. So it can be the actual participant. If it's a minor, it'll be the participant's parent or legal guardian or legal authorized representative. Okay, we already mentioned it, but we got that investigator site file. Again, is where we store the regulatory aspects of the clinical trial. although there is a section for the financial documents, such as the contract, the insurance addendum, the confidentiality agreement, oftentimes those are not stored in the site ISF. They're stored maybe on a shared drive or in their business office or internally. They don't always have that readily available in the ISF. So if they choose not to have those documents in that section, they need to create some type of note to file or progress note instructing the reviewer where those documents are located. Then we have the investigational product. This is the, or IP, this is the drug or device that's being investigated or tested in the clinical trial. The Interactive Web Response System, IWRS, or the Interactive Response Technology, IRT system. It is the computerized system used to randomize subjects. It's used to unbiasedly dispense investigator product and also unbiasedly randomize a person to the arm in which they should be in a clinical trial. So whether they receive the placebo or the investigational product at different dosages. The IRT or the IWRS system is used to reduce bias in clinical trials. Principal investigator, that PI. So this is the person that signs that 1572, that it has demonstrated that they will be responsible for the conduction of that clinical trial at their site, and they're responsible for the training of all personnel on that delegation log. Is your principal investigator. Adverse event is an untoward action. It can be related or unrelated to the IP, but anything that happens to the subject while on the clinical trial should be documented in their participants chart. A serious adverse event, or SAE, meets certain criteria such as life-threatening, result of death, prolonged hospitalization, initiation of hospitalization, congenital birth defects, and disability or incapacitation. So those are the SAEs that are possible to report in a clinical trial. Then we have the letter of interest, the LOI. So this is something that happens at the beginning stages of a clinical trial. Sponsors or CROs will send a letter out to principal investigators that they have either worked with in the past or they have researched that that individual may be an expert in that indication. So they will send them a letter of interest to see if they might be interested in conducting the clinical trial at their site. And then once that process is over, the next step is usually the confidentiality disclosure agreement, or CDA. And that is between the sponsor and the site. Now, it depends on how the site is organized. It could just be between that individual principal investigator, or it has to be between the principal investigator, the organization, and the sponsor. So it just depends on the site's SOPs. Feasibility questionnaire, the FQ, that is a document that goes out to the site once the confidentiality agreement is either finalized or it can be sent concurrently, and it allows the site to demonstrate the number of staff that they have, the patient population, how they usually recruit, what percentage of their screen patients will possibly go on to be randomized, what percentage do they project will be screen filled. So that's the type of information that is gathered from a feasibility questionnaire. Site qualification visit. Now we have completed the letter of interest process, the confidentiality process, the feasibility process, and now we want to send somebody out to the site to actually have a discussion with the PI, do a brief overview of the protocol, tour the facility, and ensure that they have the equipment or access to the equipment and diagnostic testing for the purposes of conducting the clinical trial. This visit is typically between 1 to 3 hours, very short. Minimal staff is involved. Then you have the site initiation visit. All the startup processes are not complete. The IRB approval is finalized. The contract is executed. And now that CRA will go to the site to complete the site initiation visit. And this is where all the training comes in, ensuring that the individuals on the delegation log have access to applicable vendors. The delegation log, the delegation log is retrieved along with other site initiation documents. The monitor wants to also make sure that training is completed for those who have been added to the delegation log. And they also want to check the site and staff credentials, because oftentimes there is a time lapse between that Q site qualification visit and that is an initiation visit. So you want to make sure that the staff is the same. Okay, booster visits. Not all clinical trials will undergo booster visit. These are typically done when there is an enrollment issue or a quality issue, and that CRA will attend the site more frequently, perhaps outside the monitoring plan window, to just try to support the site as best they can. Interim monitoring visits are visits that are done after a subject has been screened and randomized, and they are usually conducted in a defined window based on the monitoring plan, and they should be scheduled in advance to ensure the presence of the study coordinator and or the principal investigator. A termination visit or closeout visit, these visits are basically the same depending on the organization what they call them, but they are when everything has been finalized, the database has been locked in the EDC system, and it is time to close the study at that site. Source data verification, or SDV, is done when the monitor goes on site and reviews the source and verifies that the information in the source is the information that's in the EDC system. So that is what they're verifying. However, source data review is when that monitor comes on site and ensures that the data being collected has followed the protocol. So for example, if you are to get both sitting, lying, and standing blood pressures, the verification would be to make sure that the sitting, lying, and standing blood pressure is the exact same on that source as it is in the EDC system. But if the protocol specifies that there has to be 2 minutes apart or 5 minutes apart between those blood pressures, then the source data review makes sure that there's documentation of time to verify that the protocol was followed. So that is the difference. Site signature and delegation log, also known as delegation of authority or delegation log. It is the document that lists all the staff. It usually has their printed name, then their signature, their task that they wish they are assigned based on the legend of that design, site signature and delegation log, and the PI's authorization, signature, and date. PI signature and date should be included for the start date as well as the stop date. And that monitoring plan, it is similar to the protocol. The protocol is the instructions of which the site conducts the study. That monitor plan is the protocol in which a CRA conducts visits at the site. So is somewhat of their protocol. It details how often they should complete a visit, what documents to collect, whether the PI is required to be at that visit, how many visits they should schedule in advance. All of those details should be documented in that monitoring plan. Again, that was just a few of the common abbreviations. There is more in clinical research. The more experience you have, the more familiar you will become with those abbreviations. These are social media platforms in which this video or similar videos will be uploaded to for your training. And if you have any follow-up questions, you can email me at drhoodresearch@gmail.com. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, share, and subscribe.